UFC Fight Night 95 was this past weekend down in the capital of Brazil, Brasilia. 6 fights were shown on the FS1 main card. Looking at the first fight of the evening, it was in the featherweight division as Godfredo Pepe took on Mike De La Torre, and this one did not last very long, and most of the fights on the card ended in a finish, as 5 of the 6 main card fights did end in that fashion. The first fight, as I said, was a quick finish by one Godfredo Pepe, as he was able to submit Mike De La Torre in the first round. And as expected, Godfredo in Brazil going crazy, throwing wild shots, a lot of them landing. Mike De La Torre was never really able to get a solid footing offensively in this fight, was not able to counter inside with straight shots or circle around for takedowns, or really try to frustrate Godfredo, who's pretty much just coming forward and throwing wild, powerful looping shots. De La Torre was eating most of them, finally got dropped, and Godfredo, a very good submission expert, saw the opportunity for a rear naked choke and got the tap at 3:03 in the first round. And that's what Pepe can do to you. If you're not ready for that forward pressure, big shots, crazy power, and good submission game, he can beat you. But if you can use some footwork, kind of grind him on a little bit, make him work for those big shots, or make him really work for position and submissions off his back, then you can beat him. But if he's able to land shots like that early, he's a guy that can put you away, just like he did to Mike De La Torre. Next fight of the evening, Eric Spicely against Thiago Santos. Boy, this is a huge upset, as Eric Spicely, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, lost his first official UFC bout to Sam Alvey back in Sioux Falls in July, coming up against the top 15th ranked Thiago Santos, who, coming off a short notice loss to a very tough fighter and top contender in Gegard Mousasi, probably wanted something to prove, fighting back in his home country in Brazil against a, for most people, relatively unknown fighter in Eric Spicely. And this fight didn't have a lot going on until kind of a takedown and transition by Eric Spicely, who was able to get around the back. And kind of in a transition, you saw Santos kind of drop his hands to brace himself. And in that little moment, Spicely was able to go around, grab the choke, and get the tap there at 258 for a huge upset to get his first ever UFC victory. And this was over Thiago Santos, as I said. And really, it was just a great opportunity, and he's for Eric Spicely to kind of shock the world, so to speak. It's not the biggest upset of all time, but definitely an upset nonetheless. And this goes to show you anything can happen in mixed martial arts, and Thiago Santos maybe came into this fight possibly overlooking Eric Spicely, and I think Spicely did what he normally does. He if you saw his tenure on the Ultimate Fighter, a really solid grappler, but this was kind of just a little tactical mistake there by Thiago Santos. I mean, when you have a guy on your back like that, you can't throw out both your arms to brace yourself. You have to keep one up towards your head to protect your neck. And in that instance, Thiago Santos didn't do that. And Eric Spicely saw that and jumped on it immediately, and he got the finish and a performance of the night bonus in the process. The third fight of the evening was in the lightweight division as Francisco Trinaldo took on Paul Felder. This was a really good fight. I know it didn't win fight of the night, but I thought it was really good. First round I thought was a little more of a feeling out process with both, but it started to pick up towards the end of the round, especially with Trinaldo seeming to land some good shots, especially up against the cage. Round 2 was a lot more clinching, also some groundwork by Trinaldo as he was able to land his only takedown of the fight in round number 2. Felder didn't do much in way of submissions, and while he kept Trinaldo in the most part like in guard and half guard, he was still taking damage, still probably lost the round. I think at that point he was probably down 2-0, and also that's where the cut started to open for Paul Felder. It was due to a left elbow by Trinaldo right over the eye, and that's when it first opened up. And then in round 3, after I believe it was a straight left that landed just about right on that cut, it opened it up even more, and the referee had to come in and stop this one due to that cut at 2:25 in the third round. That was Osiris Maya had to stop in and stop that, and that was a good stoppage. That was a huge cut. He was already bleeding pretty bad, and that's a cut that definitely needed immediate medical attention. So while it's always anticlimactic, this is a doctor's stoppage that I think almost everybody would agree with. And for Paul Felder, I don't know if it would have changed the outcome too much. Yeah, in that final 2.5 minutes of the round, could he have rallied to get a finish? Absolutely. But I think Trinaldo was on his way to winning his fight in a very impressive performance for Masarumbe. And I'm looking forward to him taking on someone in the top 10. I mean, this is now his 7th win in a row in the UFC's lightweight division. The only person who has a longer winning streak in the division is Tony Ferguson. So Trinaldo is going to get somebody big next. I'm not really sure who. A lot of matchups in 155 have just been announced. A lot of big names, of course. We now have Khabib Nurmagomedov now taking on Michael Johnson. Of course, Conor McGregor is now challenging Eddie Alvarez for the 155 title. We also have Tony Ferguson taking on Rafael dos Anjos in November. So those are just about the top 6 right there in the lightweight division already booked up. Of course, you still have somebody like a Nate Diaz. However, he may be holding out for a bigger matchup, and rightly so. Also, you have Dustin Poirier, obviously coming off a loss, but still a top contender. I think would be a solid fight against somebody like a Francisco Trinaldo. So we'll see where Trinaldo kind of lies next, but he should be. Also, there's Edson Barboza is out there too. I don't know where he factors in because he deserves a top-flight opponent, beating Anthony Pettis and Gilbert Melendez in back-to-back fights. However, with a lot of those guys booked, Trinaldo, a guy who on a huge winning streak, could kind of get elevated to fighting a guy like that who just needs a fight to kind of not stay relevant, I shouldn't say that, but to stay active in pursuit of a title shot, and that's what obviously Barboza and Trinaldo are working towards. So I think that would be a very solid matchup, and honestly, I don't think it's that much of a step down for Barboza. Not too much. I think Trinaldo he's on a roll. He's definitely a force to be reckoned with. Next fight of the evening was in the heavyweight division as Roy Nelson took on Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Kind of as I thought, Roy Nelson would be able to get inside on the much slower Bigfoot Silva, who did have some good kicks in this fight. That was probably his best weapon. I think he was hurting Roy with that. But Roy, who's notoriously a tough guy to finish, was eating a lot of them and just taking a kick to come forward and land a big right. And eventually those punches added up, and he was finally able to land the big one that dropped him. I think he was close to being out after the initial hit that knocked him down. I like the fact that Big John at that moment in time didn't call the fight. I think after 1 or 2, I think he could have called it. Obviously, Roy Nelson, he kept on throwing till the fight was stopped. Was it a bit late? Yeah, I think it might have been a bit late, but I think Roy Nelson, because he's friendly and friends with Bigfoot Silva, I think took a little more. I think he was a little more egregious, or he thought Big John was being a little more egregious than maybe had he fought someone he didn't really care for, I guess. So he kind of did a push tap with his foot to Big John's posterior there. I didn't like that. Big John didn't seem to do too much about it. I think he realized Roy was doing it in the heat of the moment. He says, no disrespect to Big John, but I do the same thing again. I think Roy, I don't know if he'll get fined. I could see him getting fined. Dana White, a headline here as of today, Wednesday, September 28th, there's a headline on Sheerdog that says, Dana White says Roy Nelson needs to be buried, that's the part in quotations, for kicking referee John McCarthy. So I don't know if that means that he won't be fighting in the company anymore, or he's going to be fined or suspended, or what the case may be, but he may see some ramifications from that little push kick there to Big John. And obviously Roy Nelson and Dana White have clashed pretty much since his tenure on the season of Ultimate Fighter, season 10 that is. So it doesn't surprise me too much to have Dana White come out and say something to this effect in regards to Big Country. So we will see what happens in the next coming days. Obviously, everyone's talking about UFC 205 and all the matchups and stuff, so at least for now, Roy maybe will slip under the radar until all that maybe kind of cools down a bit until we get closer to UFC 205. But I think something's probably going to happen. It's probably going to be done by the UFC. I haven't seen too many things applied by the Brazilian commissions, so I think this is something the UFC will take upon itself to handle internally. The co-main event of the evening, Renan Barão against Philippe Nover. I thought Barão did good in this fight. I also thought Nover did good in this fight, considering that he was taking on a much more talented fighter and a guy fighting in his home country. I thought Nover held up pretty well. However, in a fight where you're taking on someone that's a heavy favorite and is perceived as the better all-around fighter, I think sometimes you got to take more chances. You can't hold back, and you can't just fight for a decision or fight to stay around. And there's no moral victories, I think, in sports. Is it great that Philippe Nover hung in there tough for 15 minutes with a former UFC champion? Yeah, but at the end of the day, he still lost. And, Renan Barão didn't overextend himself. He landed a few takedowns. He landed some nice combinations. It was a solid performance. It was better than his performance against Jeremy Stephens, obviously. Even though that was a loss, it was still a better overall performance. But for Nover, especially heading into that third round, you had to know you were probably down 2 rounds. You needed to do something to win that fight. And yeah, maybe you did eke out the third round. I think you can make a case. You look at the stats, he outstruck Barão 30-16, despite Barão having 2 takedowns. He also was more active with his strikes, throwing 67 to just 38 for Barão. Yeah, you can make a case. But even then, he's still losing 29-28. So if you're Nover, you got to kind of go for broke. You got to throw something crazy. You got to beat Renan Barão, you got to pressure him. You got to cut off his movement and throw a lot of output. You can't just sit there and try to outpoint with Renan Barão. That's not how you beat him. That's not how anyone's beat him. You have to come forward and look to hurt him. That's when he's lost. So for Nover, you didn't follow the blueprint how to beat Renan Barão. And if you're going to play Renan Barão in his game, you're not going to win. Plain and simple. Main event of the evening, Cris Cyborg took on UFC newcomer Lina Länsberg. And as most people thought, a knockout victory for Länsberg. However, Länsberg, dubbed the Elbow Queen, was able to last into the second round. However, she just got absolutely brutalized in this fight as she got taken down twice, got outstruck 100-24, and did not make a dent in what is the so far invincible aura of Cris Cyborg. And whether it's 140, 145, whatever weight she and the UFC will let her fight her at, she's got to take on somebody of note. Her beating Cans is, to me, not doing anything for her legacy. It's not really doing much for the UFC. This was a free fight card. I think if she is not going to be taking on notable names, she loses her appeal. I really do, because there's a lot of people who can knock out Cans. I mean, that's not something that should be praised. I mean, she beat a fighter she was supposed to beat. That's the good thing, and she put her away. So I can't argue with that. And you also can only fight who's put in front of you. That's also true. But for the UFC to really make Cyborg a viable commodity, a commodity people would be willing to pay their money for to see on pay-per-view, she's got to get a higher named opponent. I don't care if that's Ronda Rousey, Kat Zingano, Holly Holm, Miesha Tate. I don't care who it is, but it's got to be somebody a lot more noteworthy and who's actually fought in the UFC, unlike Lina Länsberg. That's the bottom line. Speaking of female fights. Obviously, Chris Cyborg is currently the reigning Invicta featherweight champion. Invicta held Invicta FC 19 this past weekend on the UFC Fight Pass in Kansas City. 8 fights were featured on the card. Pretty good night of fights there in Kansas City. Of course, big win there by Amber Leacock as she was able to get Lee Brock rather, as she was able to get a first-round knockout. Also, the matchup, a lot of people were looking forward to they were calling it the Mixed Martial Arts debut, but if you go on a website like SheerDog.com, you will see Tiffany Van Sosa has actually fought a Mixed Martial Arts match before. She had lost in the first round due to armbar. They were not counting that bout. I don't know if that actually was a Fisher and amateur bout or because it was in another country, they're not counting. However the case, they were dubbing it as their Mixed Martial Arts debut, but that is not actually the case, as she took on another girl making her MMA debut, actual MMA debut as far as I know, and Kaylin Schwartz, who they were calling 50 cal, as she was a former Marine. She was able to come out with the victory, second round, 208 via rear naked choke. Though Tiffany showed that the 4-ounce gloves definitely suit her, and also she fought a lot lower than she has in kickboxing. Mostly in kickboxing, you've seen her fight 120 or above. Obviously in the current Glory Super Bantamweight Grand Prix that she is a part of, where she's already competed once. I believe that is at like 120 some odd pounds. Boy, why am I forgetting the weight here? I think it's pretty close to 125. I think it might be like 122 or something like that. Anyways, she fought at this fight at strawweight. So even down a few pounds, obviously that power still there with the 4-ounce glove. She definitely hurt 50 cal. That is true. But obviously the grappling part of the game is something she's still going to have to work on. I mean, she hung tough. She could have got submitted a lot sooner than she did, and did have some bright moments, but eventually did fail to 50 cal there. Also, Irene Aldana, one of the bigger competitors in the 45 division in terms of contender status, she got another win knocking out Faith Van Duyn in the first round just as it was about to end. And then Jennifer Maia, officially now the flyweight champion for Invicta, as Barb Honchak has officially been stripped of her championship. Maia was the interim champ, so this fight for the actual flyweight championship, she was able to win a split decision over Roxanne Modafferi in the main event. Also, if you didn't know, Japan, that's right, and RIZIN held their second event numbering-wise, but third event overall this past weekend, and what was the start of their open weight Grand Prix for 2016, officially dubbed RIZIN 2 World Grand Prix 2016 opening round. Featured the likes of Gabby Garcia, who was able to win in the first round. Former Pride star, but he's still fighting there. The Crazy Horse, Charles Bennett, was able to win in a record-setting fashion just 7 seconds into the first round over Minoru Kimura. Also, you had our good friend Daron Cruickshank. He was able to defeat kickboxing legend Andy Souwer, submitting him in the first round at 4-10 for Darren's second consecutive victory. And we'll be trying to get Daron on the show to talk about his latest win there in Japan. Also, Mirko Krokop in the first round here for this tournament took out Hugh Man Myung, as he was able to submit him via R triangle choke in the first round at 220. And also, Kron Gracie, the next latest Gracie, took on longtime veteran Hideo Takoro and was able to take him out just as the first round was ending at 9:49. Remember, they used like Pride rules, so the first round was 10 minutes, submitting Takoro. And probably the biggest win to date so far for Kron Gracie in mixed martial arts. Takoro's a longtime veteran, has over 60 fights professionally, is a very wild and crazy guy, a guy that brings the fight to you. So for Kron to take out a guy of that caliber and that veteran prestige in only his third professional fight, mixed martial arts-wise, is impressive. And I think definitely maybe he will be the next Gracie to do something here in the world of mixed martial arts. Also, Bellator held their third kickboxing event. It was shown live on Friday night. However, it took place last Saturday in Budapest, Hungary. 4 fights were shown on the Spike televised card. Started first with Alexandru Negra as he defeated Ali Almira via unanimous decision. Then Denise Kiholtz just pretty much dominated Renata Kesh-Lantos. That was a very dominant performance by Kiholtz. Then Raymond Daniels took on Zolt Benedict, and Raymond, friend of the show, we're going to try to get him on to talk about this win here at Bellator Kickboxing 3 as well. Very dominant performance. Was not a first-round knockout. Definitely won the decision. Maybe got a little tired there. Of course, his last couple fights, he really hasn't had to go past halfway through the first round, so maybe that threw him a little bit as Benedict was able to take just about everything Daniels threw at him, so it wasn't from a lack of effort that Daniels did not get a knockout. So credit Benedict for hanging in there tough against a much bigger and more experienced and probably obviously a little overall better kickboxer, but he hung tough there. He's a member of the Hungarian SWAT force, basically. So definitely a tough dude, and Raymond got the win, though, and as he looks to try to fight for the welterweight championship in Bellator, was so far the only title in kickboxing for the organization, and that was defended on the same card as local Hungarian product Zoltán Lazic, if I said that correctly. He took on current champion Karim Gaji, longtime veteran of the sport, over 100 professional fights. An excellent fight for 5 rounds, just a non-stop 15 minutes between these two. I thought you could have gave Zoltán the first. That first round was very close. He really came out on fire against Gaji. I thought had really surprised Gaji, kind of caught him by surprise. However, towards the end of the first round, Gaji really started to kind of figure things out. He survived that initial storm, maybe a little slowing down from Zoltán. And I thought Gaji really stormed back in that first round. So the first round was close. The only round where both guys kind of were a little bit tired to me was the third round. It definitely seemed in the third round both kind of were slowing down a little bit, and they seemed to kind of pick it up back in 4 and 5 as they kind of seemed to get their second win. And I think you maybe could have gave Zoltán round 3. However, I still would have probably scored it 49-46 Gaji. I would have gave Gaji, I think I would have gave Zoltán the third round, would have gave Gaji the remaining 4. 2 judges had it 48-47, one for Gaji, one for Zoltán. Can't complain too much. However, the final score, the one that decided giving Zoltán the championship, was 49-46 in favor of the Hungarian. And I thought that was bad. I don't see how you can make a case for 4 rounds for Zoltán. I really don't. I think 3 is even a stretch, to be honest. I really thought the first and third were the only rounds you could really give him. And I'm not saying they weren't close rounds, because this was an incredible fight, but, oh man, 4-1? I don't know. So I don't know, as far as Raymond Daniels' title status go, this is something that could affect it, because obviously I think that was a very egregious decision. So it could be a case where Gaji gets a rematch, and that would be deservingly so. However, if they want Gaji to wait, I could see Raymond taking on Zoltán and then possibly the winner of Zoltán and Raymond Daniels. We shall see. I'm not sure what is next for Bellator kickboxing in terms of that picture. However, they already have announced their next event, which should look really good. It's going to feature Raymond Daniels. It's going to feature Gregorian. It's going to feature Joe Schilling. It's going to feature Denise Kiholtz. And it's going to be in Italy. So that's going to be in December. It's going to be a fantastic fight. It'll be pretty much their biggest stars coming to fruition there. And hopefully that is shown live. I guess it will also be part of a MMA fight. So it'll be kind of going back to having... It's not a Dynamite, but I think it's going to be very similar to the kickboxing debut, where it's like they kind of had kickboxing one night, they changed the thing around in the same venue, and then they have mixed martial arts. So it's going to be a very similar thing to the first fight of Bellator kickboxing. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to get some more information here on this card, but it doesn't look like that they're showing it yet. I know I saw a press release, so it's definitely out there. You definitely can look it up. So, looking forward to that, and hopefully it's live, because I don't like the tape delay. It's 2016. People want the results now. There was no reason to show that on tape delay. You could have easily even if you show on tape delay just to show it at a later time on last Saturday, or I guess 2 Saturdays ago now, that's fine. I kind of get that. That makes total sense because it would have been, I think, like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. You're competing with college football. Yeah, maybe you don't want to do that. I get that, but yeah, we'll see, and hopefully they can rectify it because what I saw on Saturday was pretty solid, especially that main event, and I want to see more. Hi, everybody, and once again, welcome back to Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Joining me on the line, we have a special guest. He is fresh off his victory at RIZIN 2. He is the Detroit superstar, Daron Cruickshank. And Daron, thanks again for coming back on Beyond the Cage.
Thanks for having me on.
Daron, let's get to your fight right off the bat there. You were taking on kickboxing legend Andy Souwer in this fight. So obviously you were expecting him to be very good in that category. However, you probably changed the gears on him and really went to your wrestling game. Was that pretty much the game plan for you, was to have that initial feeling out process and then take the fight to the ground once you saw that opportunity?
Actually, no, there was no, I didn't have a game plan. It just kind of went that way because we were both standing in front of each other, waiting for the other person to go, kind of thing. I think we both maybe respected our striking game and like a little too much, and that's why we didn't really engage a whole lot. I engaged. He threw basically the same thing at the same time. We both threw the jab overhand. We both flipped it. I sank in a nice little knee on the engage, and then we broke apart. And that, I mean, that was basically all she wrote as far as the striking game. And I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to take it to the ground, see where it goes from there, and follow it up, fight's over, basically.
Now, was there any part of you that wanted to stand with him more, or were you more worried about, you know what, this is an MMA fight, the most important thing is getting a victory no matter what?
Not really. In my head, I was going to, I thought if I took him down and pounded on him a little bit, then later on in the fight, I can actually use that takedown as like a fake, and it'll help my striking game. I figured he'd be able to escape, but he wasn't able to, so I didn't get to that point.
Now, of course, you got the submission victory 4-10 into the first round. This was your only second career submission victory. Do you remember your first submission victory back in 2010?
Yeah, it was kind of the same situation. The guy didn't want to get hit in the face anymore, and he gives me their back off mounting someone. I think that's actually a normal thing that happens. You start cracking somebody, and they always turn and give you their back, and that's what happened.
Do you remember the gentleman's name that you defeated in your first submission victory?
I do not remember his name.
Okay.
But I do remember the fight. What?
Just to refresh you, it was Brett Biederman, and you beat him at XCC 38 Rumble in Royal Oak 5 in 2010.
Yeah. I was just a baby.
Yes, that was your second professional fight.
Yep, just a baby.
Now, getting to the arena that was there in Japan and the ring and everything and the other fights, did this event seem a lot different to you than your first RIZIN event? Because just watching, as a fan, it seemed a lot different, seemed a lot bigger this time around than your first fight.
Yeah, they actually, I want to say they probably put a little bit more money into this one. They was at a bigger arena. There was a huge crowd. They're still pretty new as far as the company, so they're feeling it out, seeing if they could get this ball rolling. And I think they're actually doing a really good job.
Now, of course, on the night you had a lot of notable names fight on the card beside yourself. Most notably, probably Mirko Krokop, the former Pride Grand Prix champion, fought and won. Was there any other fights that you enjoyed watching there on the card for RIZIN 2?
I watched the one girl fight. I forget the little Japanese girl that's a wrestler. She really impressed me. Not only was her wrestling good, but she wasn't afraid to just sit there and throw. And I was like, wow, because, I mean, realistically, I'm not really impressed with a whole lot of the girl fighters out there, but that fight, it was entertaining for me to watch.
Now, of course, after the fight, you were talking to the fans, and you kind of brought up who they want you to see next. You heard some names throw out Aoki. Obviously, you did that after your first win as well. But another name I think would be good for you if the Aoki fight doesn't materialize. He had a very impressive 7-second knockout victory on the card, that being Charles Bennett. Would that be a fight you would like, possibly you against the Crazy Horse?
I would fight him. I don't think it would be a good fight for him, being, he's not going to get lucky with me, you know what I'm saying? But it'd be, whatever. Whoever they throw at me, I'll be okay with.
Now, of course, you signed a 3-fight deal earlier this year with RIZIN. You would have one more fight under the current contract. Do you feel, regardless of how your next fight goes with the promotion, that you would resign, or do you think that you'll just kind of have to wait and see once that third fight actually takes place?
Yeah, I think RIZIN likes me. I think they expected more of a striking battle from my last fight, but unfortunately, it didn't go that way because he didn't really come after me. I didn't really go after him. It was kind of like a standstill. So, but I think they like me. I think I'm good as far as, I put on a good show most of the time. So, and I think that's why I can basically probably go anywhere. So.
Now, this time for your RIZIN fight, you fought a little different gloves than your first one, not only just in color, but it looked in style as well. They were kind of like a grayish green, kind of almost camouflage, denim style color, I guess, if you will, and they looked a little different. Did they feel different to you than the gloves you had worn for your first fight?
I want to say they were the same glove. They were just different color. That's all. That's the only difference.
Now, the ring you fought in, I don't know if it was just the matting or, like you said, maybe being a bigger arena, but the ring looked like it was a lot different. It looked better. I don't know if that's maybe a weird term, but it seemed like more of a professional ring. I didn't notice if you noticed a different feel in that ring as opposed to your first fight.
I want to say it was the same ring, which is, I've never been in a ring. Like, I've only trained in rings. I've never fought in a ring other than the first time. But it was actually, the ropes are pretty solid. It's not even like a rope. It's like a steel wire with rubber around it. But the matting is actually really squishy. Like, it can take an impact. Like, it was almost like a gymnastics, like bounce mat kind of thing.
Now, for what will be your third fight, I'm assuming they haven't announced their next event, but I'm assuming they're probably going to have an event around New Year's Eve, as RIZIN and then going back to kind of Dream and Pride have historically done. Is that when you look to fight next, possibly there around New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I think they're going to have a show December. For like the New Year's. I don't think it's announced. It's probably not set in stone. They're trying to see the logistics of it. But yeah, if they have another show, I'll probably be on it. But just gotta wait to see who they match me up with.
Now, of course, they're currently having an open weight Grand Prix with guys like Mirko Krokop and Vanderlei Silva. If they do kind of like what Pride did back in the day, they're obviously going to have different divisions being showcased in a Grand Prix format. Is that something that, if they announced a 155 Grand Prix, is that something you would want to do, fight in kind of like possibly 4 months in a 3 or 4 fights in a short time span?
I think that would actually be really cool. It'd probably take me back to like my wrestling years when you had a season, you had brackets and things like that. So I think it'd be pretty cool.
what do you think about the current Grand Prix guys like Crow Cop and Vanderlei Silva in there? Shane Carwin has expressed interest. Do you think that's going to be really big for the organization having stars like that compete in a tournament like this?
Well, I think it's a pretty big draw. As far as like the fans and stuff like that, it's it's pretty cool. I think they should get some legends, some older legends around my weight in there.
Now, of course, you expressed interest in Shinya Aoki. I brought up Charles Bennett. Is there any other names that you kind of think about potentially fighting possibly in December, or like you said, just kind of whatever they decide to give you?
Yeah, whatever they decide to give me, I'm sure they'll match me up with somebody that they think would be a good show. I don't think Aoki would take the fight, and the only reason why he would is be for like quite a bit of money. But we'll see. We'll see what he thinks.
Now, of course, since the last time we talked to you back in March for that victory, you had a birthday, so happy belated birthday. And what'd you do for your birthday?
Well, what am I, 31 or 32 this year? I don't even remember, dude.
I think it says 31.
Yeah, holy crap. I might as well be 40. I don't know. I think we went to Cedar Point, because what's life if you never make it to the point?
Totally. And, of course, obviously, as most people know, you are a gun enthusiast. You like going out to the gun range and doing stuff like that. Obviously, I know it's only been a few days from your victory. I know sometimes you like to kind of celebrate and get yourself a new weapon of choice. Has that happened yet? And if so, what's the new hotness for you there, Daron?
Well, I haven't bought a new gun. I actually bought a infrared sight, so I can basically see. Have you ever seen the movie The Predator? You know how it flips to the Predator and he can see weird colors and stuff? It looks just like that. So you can see things pitch black. You pick up heat signature. So apocalypse happens. There's no lights anywhere, and I'm posted up on my roof protecting my family.
Obviously, you trained there at Michigan Top Team. Obviously, you gave a nice shout out to your gym and website there after the win. I know your good friend and co-owner there, Jason Fisher, recently returned to action, and I know Cody Stamen is slowly building up a really nice winning streak here. Is there anyone else that fans should pay attention to that's coming out of your gym right now?
Yeah, we have Jesse Bazzi. He's on a pretty good streak right now. Everybody knows Mike Hernandez is doing okay. He's lost his last couple fights, but before that he was on a knockout streak. We have a bunch of people. I mean, Randa has been doing well. She lost her last fight, but again, a little reload action and get back into the game.
He is the Detroit superstar, Daron Cruickshank. You can follow him on Twitter at Cruickshank155. And Daron, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to you fighting again, hopefully, later this year.
Well, thanks for having me. Anytime, just hit me up, and I appreciate the support.
That is the Detroit superstar, Daron Cruickshank, and you heard him right here on Beyond the Cage. UFC Fight Night 96 will be in Portland, Oregon. The main card shown on Fox Sports 1 will start at 11 p.m. Eastern. 4 fights will be featured as our good friend and currently number 9 ranked flyweight fighter Louis Smolka will take on Brandon Moreno. Moreno, you may remember, just fought on this current season, still airing, of The Ultimate Fighter Season 24. However, he was eliminated in the very first fight of the show, so he is stepping up on short notice, about 2 weeks, to take on Smolka, who was originally scheduled to fight Anthony Pettis' brother. And good on Moreno for being able to step up, and good for the UFC able to keep Lewis on the card. Sergio Pettis, I couldn't think of his first name for whatever reason, but Sergio Pettis was supposed to take on Smolka here, which was an incredible fight of two young rising stars in this division. However, I do hope that fight happens at some point, and I am a fan of Sergio as well, so I wish him a speedy recovery. But for Moreno, guy who was ranked the number 16 fighter on this season of the Ultimate Fighters, they're doing a bracket, all these regional promotion champions, of course, with the winner earning a shot at Demetrius Money Mouse Johnson. Moreno was ranked 16, took on the number 1 seed, the current RFA flyweight champion, and hung tough against a very skilled fighter, and learned a lot. The guy can definitely take a punch. He can dish it out. He's still maybe a little raw, but definitely is a guy that will go down fighting. And Smolka on short notice, I'm not saying he'll have more work cut out for him, but it's a guy that even on short notice, I don't think he can take too lightly. This is a guy that definitely has some power, and if Lewis is not careful and not paying attention, a guy that could put him away. However, Lewis in his last couple of fights has, I shouldn't say that he's had a slow start, I just think his opponents have really tried to overwhelm him early, and both times Lewis has been able to overcome that and just dominate and eventually get a finish. So I think that he has fought adversity in his 2 wins, and they have ended up becoming dominant victories and good victories. So Moreno's not anybody that Lewis is going to be scared of or worried about in terms of skills, but he should be worried about at least the knockout power and the fact he's a tough guy, to maybe not overextend himself, because this is a guy that definitely can take a punch. So I think those are the only thing Lewis will have to adjust on from taking on Sergio Pettis. And I think if Lewis fights the way he's been fighting, I see no reason he can't pick up another victory here in the flyweight division. And for Moreno, a guy that obviously the UFC liked enough to bring back, sign him to a contract, and obviously this fight's on short notice, so even if he loses, especially against a guy that's ranked in the top 10, you got to believe he's coming back for another fight, possibly in December at the finale. So for Moreno, it's really a no-lose situation. Next fight of the evening, Josh Berkman will take on Zach Ottawato. Not too much known on this guy. He's a newcomer to the UFC, 13-3 in his career. A lot of submission victories for him, as the website on the UFC website, I should say, lists 77% of his victories by submission. So I believe that's probably like 10, and then probably 2 knockouts and 1 decision. I'm pretty sure that's how that breaks down. Take on longtime veteran and former World Series of Fighting champion Josh Berkman, who looks like he's moving back up to 170. Had a quick dip down there at 155. It did not go well. I just think that was a lot of weight, especially at this stage of his career, a guy already in his mid-30s. Returning to the UFC has not been kind to him. However, he's had good fights in terms of exciting fights, so I think that's one of the reasons why he's kind of hung around a lot since returning to the organization. That was back in 2015 January. However, that did go down as a no contest, of course, as Hector Lombard was proved to be using a performance-enhancing substance. But even taking that off the picture, in 5 fights since returning, he's only won 1 fight. And that was against KJ Noons, a guy that kind of is a natural 155er anyway, and that was only by decision. However, he did have a fight of the night performance against Patrick Cote, and like I said, he dropped down to 155 in his last fight against Paul Felder. So I think this is kind of the last chance here for Josh Berkman. I mean, if he can't beat a guy who's never fought in the UFC before, he probably shouldn't be hanging around anymore. So this is a big fight for Josh Berkman. I definitely think this is a do-or-die fight. And for Ottawa, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. I'm going to go with Ottawa. Again, much similar to Moreno. Nothing to lose in this fight, taking on a much more established game in your UFC debut on a main card. That's a big deal. So definitely nothing to lose. And I don't know a lot about Ottawa. Obviously, he has a lot of submissions to his credit, so I'm assuming he probably would like to turn this into a grappling match. And I think Josh Berkman, solid grappler, but I would say probably a little better in his stand-up game. Berkman has been submitted quite a few times in his career, so I think if Ottawa can turn that into like a jiu-jitsu match, he'll have a better chance to win. But if it stays standing, I definitely would have to give the edge to Josh Berkman. Co-main event of the evening, I'm really excited to see this fight as Will Brooks will take on the Brazilian cowboy Alex Oliveira. Oliveira, of course, comes into the fight with a record of 14-3. He also does have a no contest. Will Brooks just 18-1. Yeah, just 18-1. He won his UFC debut over Ross Pearson back in July in that season of the Ultimate Fighter finale, 23. And has not lost since losing to Saeed Awad a few years ago in Bellator, and of course being a former Bellator champion as well. He also did fight, he had a fight in Dream back in the day. I kind of forgot that. So if you look at the UFC website, you'll think he had fought 2 times in the UFC, but no, one of those was in Dream. Against Ross Pearson, he did win, yes. It was an alright performance, not the greatest, not even the greatest Will Brooks performance, but he beat a solid veteran. He did so on short notice, and definitely a guy I think that can make some waves here in the UFC's lightweight division. So far for Oliveira, pretty impressive, 4-2. His only losses coming to Gilbert Burns, which was a close fight. He was probably winning, but then ended up getting caught in a submission in the 3rd round. That was his debut. And then up away on short notice in the main event, no less. He lost to the Cowboy Donald Cerrone. No shame in that. He looked really good in his last fight against James Mutasari at UFC Fight Night back in July 23rd. I think that was in Chicago. So that was UFC on Fox. So that was a bounce back win after there. Will Brooks, however, is a guy that will make you work. He makes you work for everything, and is a guy that's very technically sound, both in his stand-up and in his wrestling. However, he's a guy that doesn't really take too many chances, and he's a guy that really doesn't put you away. He doesn't really go for the finish. So a guy that is very big, very strong, a guy that has some good knockout power, and also some decent submissions, a guy who does usually trying to go in there and knock your head off. That's a good thing for Oliveira, because the longer Will Brooks, leaves you hanging around, the more chances you have to possibly catch him with something. Now, Will Brooks has only been caught once, and that was just Saeed Awad, who was on a roll at that time, just kind of came blasting forward. And I don't know if that's the only way you can beat him, but that may be something Oliveira may want to try, to really pressure Will Brooks early with the finish, because Oliveira, a guy not known for his conditioning, he's a really big 155-pound fighter, a guy that has had some issues with the conditioning. Obviously, Will Brooks has never faltered in that category. So that may be something Oliveira might want to try, is to just really come out the gates fast and hard and try to throw Will Brooks off his game, a guy that definitely is somewhat of a rhythm fighter. And if you can throw him off his rhythm, you can possibly beat him. But if you kind of sit around there, play at range, play at distance, or allow him to get inside and take you down and land you and kind of throw pillow fist, to be honest, because he doesn't have a lot of finishes in his record, he can beat you. And for a 15-minute fight, he could do that. He can do that in his sleep. So I think for Oliveira, I think that first round is very key for him in potentially winning this fight. Don't blink on this one, as John Lineker against John Dodson, 2 former flyweights now turn bantamweights. Lineker has shot up the rankings, especially after his last fight, knocking out top contender Michael McDonald in the very first round. He is now currently ranked 3rd. John Dodson re-entered the bantamweight picture, where he was on his season, The Ultimate Fighter, where he won as he knocked out former bantamweight champion T.J. Dillashaw in the process in the first rounds. Had a pretty successful run at flyweight, however, ran into Mighty Mouse not once but twice, and lost, just as everyone has, against Mighty Mouse at 125 pounds. So, up at bantamweight, he made his return to the division, knocking out long-time stalwart in a lot of divisions, and of course former Ultimate Fighter runner-up in Manny Gamburian. Knocked him out in the first round, a very fantastic performance. And these two guys, being former flyweights, are just super fast. They both have a lot of power, still, even both of them moving up the 10 pounds. And I just find it hard to believe this thing will go 25 minutes. One of these two will catch each other, and it's probably going to be brutal. It's going to be awesome in the process. I don't know if they get a title shot, but they definitely get a huge fight in their next matchup, and definitely this is a huge contender fight in the bantamweight division. However, I think technically John Dodson is the better fighter. I think he also has the better wrestling game. I don't know if he's necessarily quicker. I think they both hit just as hard, maybe Lineker a little harder. But also add in the Greg Jackson factor. John Dodson's going to be ready to go against John Lineker. And no offense to John Lineker, but John Dodson's been to the top of the hill. He's fought the best in the world twice. And that first time, had Mighty Mouse hurt. He did have Mighty Mouse in a little bit of trouble in that fight. You can't deny that. He did have him in trouble. Did he ultimately lose once, but twice? Yes, he did. But he had him in trouble in that first fight. And I think Dodson's a guy that's very confident of his abilities. He's not going to be scared or intimidated by John Lineker. And I think his movement will be a little hard for Lineker to match. I don't think he's fought, at least at bantamweight, and even at flyweight, I don't think he's fought a guy quite like John Dodson. So I think a slight edge in speed, and that could be the difference. However, it only takes one punch, and either of these guys definitely have enough power to end the other's night very quickly. Also, looking over the undercard, Nate Marquardt against the Barn Cat, Tamden McRory, should be pretty awesome. That's going to be actually on the Fight Pass portion of the undercard, so definitely look out for that fight as well. And also, Andre Feely will be fighting on the FS2 portion of the prelims. He will take on Hakern Diaz in the featherweight division. So those are kind of the two fights I would keep an eye out for on the undercard. But with that said, let's get to my picks here for UFC Fight Night 96 in Portland. Louis Smolka against Brendan Moreno. Of course, maybe a little bias here. Good friends with Louis. Talked to him quite a bit, and obviously hope to have him on after another victory. And no offense to Moreno, I definitely think he has a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but on short notice against a guy the caliber of The Last Samurai, who will be representing Japan with his UFC fight kit in this fight, I think it's going to be a lot to overcome, so give me Smolka to win this one. Josh Berkman against newcomer Zach Ottawa. I don't know a lot about Ottawa. He seems to be a pretty good submission guy. Maybe he catches Berkman something, but I think Berkman, knowing this could be a do-or-die fight, again, has only won one fight in his last 5 since returning to the UFC about 19 months ago. I'm sorry. That would be like 20 months ago. I think his back is up against the wall. I think he knows he needs to perform, so I'm going to go with the veteran Josh Berkman to win this one. Will Brooks against Alex Oliveira. Gotta go with Will Brooks. I think Alex Oliveira definitely can win this fight. He has some skills, but Will Brooks he hasn't faltered too many times, so I think he's maybe the safe pick in this one. So I'm gonna go with Will Brooks in this one. Main events of the evening: John Lineker against John Dodson. You would think, number 3 guy taking on an unranked guy, that's a huge mismatch, but it's not. In fact, I think Dodson should be the favorite, and that's my pick too. I think Dodson, just because he hasn't fought too many times in the UFC in the bantamweight division, does not mean that you should underestimate him. So if you come into this thing maybe as a little more casual viewer, don't think that Dodson's that far behind John Lineker, who's ranked number 3. And that's not to take anything from Lineker's accomplishments so far, who seems to have found a home in this bantamweight division where he doesn't have to cut as much weight to make 225. I just think Dodson is just going to be too quick for him, and Lineker, despite being a very powerful individual, will have some trouble landing those powerful combinations. So I'm going to take the Magician to win this one. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. I'm also on Instagram at the Jim Graham. You can check out more Beyond the Cage at facebook.com/BeyondTheCage and like our page today. We're in the quest for 500 likes, trying to give away some cool prizes. So you can, again, head on over there and check out what those prizes are. But there are a whole bunch of signed photos from various mixed martial arts and kickboxing fighters, many from the UFC, Bellator, and Glory. So check out that over at facebook.com/BeyondTheCage podcast and like our page today if you haven't. If you're watching on YouTube, hopefully you subscribe to the channel, but if you don't, please hit the subscribe button there at youtube.com/BeyondTheCage podcast and like and share and check out the videos. If you prefer to listen audio-wise, you can listen to the show a couple different ways for the audio version podcast. You can listen on the Stitcher mobile app. You can also listen to the show on iTunes and Google Play by searching Beyond the Cage podcast. Also, you can check out recent interviews and also sneak peeks at interviews, as sometimes I will put them on before they air on the show to give you guys an exclusive early look at fighter interviews, and that's on my SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Jim Graham. I'd like to thank partners and friends that always support Beyond the Cage, and Flying Brian J, of course, the MMAcommunity.com, MMA Fight Club, the great Facebook blog. You can like their page at MMAFightClub.com, and also they just launched MMAFightClub.net for exclusive stories, and of course, you can watch Beyond the Cage on there as well. So check them out and their brand new website at MMAFightClub.net. Also, our friends at MMAinsider.net and MMAforlife.ca as well. Legends of the Cage and the curator there, Brian Moore, always supporting Beyond the Cage. So shout out to the guys at Legends of the Cage. Also, I'd like to thank Adam Nelson, a.k.a. Gorilla the Bear, the incredible artist, doing a lot of mixed martial arts inspired art. And actually, you can see, if you see behind me, over here on my right shoulder, you will see a picture of the Winter Soldier, if you didn't know who that was. And that art was provided to me by Adam Nelson, a.k.a. Gorilla the Bear. You can check him out on Twitter and Instagram, GorillaTheBear.com. And he is available for commissions to do your own exclusive mixed martial arts piece, or in this case, a cool comic book piece as well. He did a great job, by the way. So check out his art at Gorilla the Bear, Twitter and Instagram. Also would like to thank AJ Hiller, my good friend, running MMASignaturesUSA.com, the #1 site in the world for mixed martial arts memorabilia. He was just telling me he got a whole bunch of Amanda Nunes stuff in. So if you're a fan of Amanda Nunes, the current and reigning UFC women's bantamweight champion, head over to MMASignaturesUSA.com and you can check out the signed photos and gear there. I think that's about everything for this week. Again, I am Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.